Alright, what's going on, guys? It is your boy, Mr. 24/7, and today we're going to be reading chapters 6 and 7 of the OutSiders. We left off on chapter 5. So today we're going to be reading chapter 6 and 7, because I told you guys that we will be reading 2 chapters per episode. And I turned on comments because I want to see your guys' comments and stuff. So, hi Rosalie, of course you're here first because you know you're the only one, you're always the first one here. Hashtag notification squad. You already know what it is. Alright, let me try to find the chapter here. Alright. Here we go. Chapter 6. Johnny gagged and I almost dropped my hot fudge sundae. Cherry? We both said at the same time. The Soch? Yeah, Dally said. She came over to the vacant lot the night 2-Bit was jumped. Shepard and some of his outfit and us were hanging around there when she drives up in her little old Stingray. That took a lot of nerve. Some of us was jumping her then and there, her being the dead kid's girl and all, but 2-Bit stopped us. Man, next time I want a broad, I'll pick up my own kind. Yeah, Johnny said slowly. And then I wondered if, like me, he was remembering another voice, also tough and just deepened into manhood, saying, next time you want a broad, pick up your own kind. It gave me the creeps. Dally was going on. She said she felt the whole mess was her fault, which it is, and that she'd keep up with what was coming off with the Soches in the Rumble, and would testify that the Soches were drunk and looking for a fight, and that you fought back in self-defense. He gave a grim laugh. That little gal sure does hate me. I offered to take her over to the Dingo for a Coke, and she said no. Thank you, and told me where I could go in very polite terms. She was afraid of loving you, I thought. So Cherry Valance, the cheerleader, Bob's girl, the Soch, was trying to help us. No, it wasn't Cherry the Soch who was helping us. It was Cherry the dreamer who watched sunsets and couldn't stand fights. It was hard to believe a Soch would help us, even a Soch that dug sunsets. Dally didn't notice. He had forgotten about it already. Man, this place is out of it. What do they do for kicks around here? Play checkers? Dally surveyed the scene without interest. I ain't never been in the country before. Have you two? Johnny shook his head, but I said, Dad used to take us all hunting. I've been in the country before. How'd you know about the church? I got a cousin that lives around here somewheres. Tipped me off that I'd make a tough hideout in case of something. Hey, Ponyboy, I heard you was the best shot in the family. Yeah, I said. Daddy always got the most ducks, though. Him and Dad, Soda and I goofed around too much, scared most of our game away. I couldn't tell Dally that I hated to shoot things. He'd think I was soft. That was a good idea. I mean, cutting your hair and bleaching it. They printed your descriptions in the paper, but you sure wouldn't fit in now. Johnny had been quietly finishing his 5th barbecue sandwich, but now he announced, we're going back and turn ourselves in. It was Dally's turn to gag. Then he swore a while. Then he turned to Johnny and demanded, what? I said we're going back and to turn ourselves in. Johnny repeated in a quiet voice. I was surprised but not shocked. I had thought about turning ourselves in lots of times, but apparently the whole idea was a jolt to Dallas. I got a good chance of being let off easy, Johnny said desperately, and I didn't know if it was Dally he was trying to convince or himself. I ain't got no record with the fuzz, and it was self-defense. Ponyboy and Cherry can testify that, and I don't aim to stay in that church all my life. That was quite a speech for Johnny. His big black eyes grew bigger than ever at the thought of going to the police station, for Johnny had a deathly fear of cops. But he went on. We won't tell that you helped us, Dally, and we'll give you back the gun and what's left of the money, and say we hitchhiked back, so you won't get into any trouble, okay? Dally was chewing the corner of his ID card, which gave his age as 21 so he could buy liquor. You sure you want to go back? Us greasers get it worse than anyone else. Johnny nodded. I'm sure. It ain't fair for Ponyboy to have to stay up in that church with Derry and Soda worrying about him all the time. I don't guess... He swallowed and tried not to look eager. I don't guess my parents are worried about me or anything. The boys are worried, Dally said in a matter-of-fact voice. Two-Bit was going to Texas to hunt for you. My parents, Johnny repeated doggedly. Did they ask about me? No, snapped Dally. They didn't. Blasted, Johnny. What do they matter? Shoot, my old man don't give a hang whether I'm in jail or dead in a car wreck or drunk in the gutter. They don't bother me none. Johnny didn't say anything, but he stared at the dashboard with such hurt bewilderment that I could have bawled. Hi Jason, welcome to the stream. And Miss G, Jason says hi apparently, if you can see on the screen. Dally cussed under his breath and nearly tore out the transmission of the T-Bird as we roared out of the Dairy Queen. I felt sorry for Dally. He meant it when he said he didn't care about his parents. But he and the rest of the gang knew Johnny cared and did everything they could to make it up to him. I didn't know what it was about Johnny. Maybe that lost puppy look and those big scared eyes are what made everyone his big brother. But they couldn't. No matter how hard they tried to take the place of his parents. I thought about it for a minute. Derry and Soda Pop were my brothers, and I loved both of them, even if Derry did scare me. But not even Soda could take Mom and Dad's place. And they were my real brothers, not just sort of adopted ones. No wonder Johnny was hurt because his parents didn't want him. Dally could take it. Dally was of the breed that could take anything, because he was hard and tough, and when he wasn't, he could turn hard and tough. Johnny was a good fighter and could play it cool, but he was sensitive, and that isn't a good way to be when you're a greaser. Blasted Johnny, Dally growled as we flew along the red road. Why didn't you think of turning yourself in 5 days ago? Would have saved a lot of trouble. I was scared, Johnny said with conviction. I still am. He ran his finger down one of his short black sideburns. I guess we ruined our hair for nothing, Ponyboy. I guess so. I was glad we were going back. I was sick of that church. I didn't care if I was bald. Dally was scowling, and from long and painful experience, I knew better than to talk to him when his eyes were blazing like that. I'd likely as not get clobbered over the head. That had happened before. Just as it had happened to all the gang at one time or another. We rarely fought among ourselves. Dally was the unofficial leader, since he had kept his head best. Soda and Steve had been best friends since grade school and never fought, and Two-Bit was just too lazy to argue with anyone. Johnny kept his mouth shut too much to get into arguments, and nobody ever fought with Johnny. I kept my mouth shut too, but Dally was a different matter. If something beefed him, he didn't keep quiet about it, and if you rubbed him the wrong way, look out. Not even Derry wanted to tangle with him. He was dangerous. Johnny just sat there and stared at his feet. He hated for any one of us to be mad at him. He looked awful sad. Dally glanced at him out of the corner of his eye. I looked out the window. Johnny, Dally said in a pleading high voice, using a tone I had never heard from him before. Johnny, I ain't mad at you. I just don't want you to get hurt. You don't know what a few months in jail can do to you. Oh, blast it, Johnny. He pushed his white blonde hair back out of his eyes. You get hardened in jail. I don't want that to happen to you, like it happened to me. I kept staring out the window at the rapidly passing scenery, but I felt my eyes getting round. Dally never talked like that. Never. Dally didn't give a Yankee dime about anyone but himself, and he was cold and hard and mean. He never talked about his past or being in jail that way. If he talked about it at all, it was a brag. And I suddenly thought of Dally, in jail at the age of 10. Dally growing up in the streets. Would you rather have me living in hideouts for the rest of my life? Always on the run? Johnny asked seriously. If Dally had said yes, Johnny would have gone back to the church without hesitation. He figured Dally knew more than he did, and Dally's word was law. But he never heard Dally's answer, for we had reached the top of J Mountain, and Dally suddenly slammed on the brakes and stared. Oh, glory, he whispered. The church was on fire. Let's go see what the deal is, I said, hopping out. What for? Dally sounded irritated. Get back in here before I beat your head in. I knew Dally would have to park the car and catch me before he could carry out his threat, and Johnny was already out and following me, so I figured we were safe. We could hear him cussing us out, but he wasn't mad enough to come after us. There was a crowd at the front of the church, most likely kids, and I wondered how they'd gotten there so quickly. I tapped the nearest grown-up. What's going on? Well, we don't know for sure, the man said with a good-natured grin. We were having a school picnic up here, and the first thing we knew, the place is burning up. Thank goodness this is a wet season and the old thing is worthless anyway. Then, to the kids, he shouted, Stand back, children. The firemen are coming. I bet we started it, I said to Johnny. We must have dropped a lighted cigarette or something. About that time, a lady came running up. Jerry, some of the kids are missing. They're probably around here somewhere. You can't tell with all this excitement where they might be. No, she shook her head. They've been missing at least in half an hour. I thought they were climbing the hill. Then we all froze. Faintly. Just faintly. You could hear someone yelling. And it sounded like it was coming from inside the church. The woman went white. I told them not to play in the church. I told them. She looked like she was going to start screaming, so Jerry shook her. I'll get them. Don't worry. I started at a dead run for the church, and the man caught my arm. I'll get them. You kids stay out. I jerked loose and ran on. All I could think was, we started it. We started it. We started it. I wasn't about to go through the flaming door, so I slammed a big rock through the window and pulled myself in. It was a wonder I didn't cut myself to death, now that I think about it. Hey, Pony Boy. I looked around, startled. I hadn't realized Johnny had been right behind me all the way. I took a deep breath and started coughing. The smoke filled my eyes, and they started watering. That guy coming? Johnny shook his head. The window stopped him. Too scared? Nah. Johnny gave me a grin. Too fat. I couldn't laugh because I was scared. I drowned in the smoke. The roar and crackling was getting louder, and Johnny shouted the next question. Hold on, guys, I'm sorry. Oh, God. I couldn't laugh because I was scared. I drowned in the smoke. The roar and crackling was getting louder, and Johnny shouted the next question. Where's the kids? In the back, I guess, I hollered, and we started stumbling through the church. I should be scared, I thought, with an odd detached feeling, but I'm not. The cinders and embers began falling on us, stinging and smarting like ants. Suddenly, in the red glow and the haze, I remembered wondering what it was like in a burning ember, and I thought, now I know. It's a red hell. Why aren't I scared? We pushed open the door to the back room and found 4 or 5 little kids, about 8 years old or younger, huddled in a corner. One was screaming his head off, and Johnny yelled, Shut up! We're going to get you out! The kid looked surprised and quit hollering. I blinked myself. Johnny wasn't behaving at all like his old self. He looked over his shoulder and saw that the door was blocked by flames, then pushed open the window and tossed out the nearest kid. I can think of when I saw him without that defeated, suspicious look in his eyes. He looked like he was having the time of his life. I picked up a kid and he promptly bit me, but I leaned out the window and dropped him as gently as I could, being in a hurry like that. A crowd was there by that time. Dally was standing there, and when he saw me, he screamed, "For Pete's sake, get out of here. That roof's gonna cave in any minute. Forget those blasted kids." I didn't pay any attention, although pieces of the old roof were crashing down too close for comfort. I snatched up another kid, hoping he didn't bite, and dropped him without waiting to see if he landed okay or not. I was coughing so hard I could hardly stand up, and I wished I had the time to take off Dally's jacket. It was hot. We dropped the last of the kids out as the front of the church started to crumble. Johnny shoved me toward the window. "Get out!" I leaped out the window and heard timber crashing and the flames roaring right behind me. I staggered, almost falling, coughing and sobbing for breath. Then I heard Johnny scream, and as I turned to go back for him, Dally swore at me and clubbed me across the back as hard as he could, and I went down into a peaceful darkness. When I came to, I was being bounced around, and I ached and smarted and wondered dimly where I was. I tried to think, but there was a high-pitched screaming going on, and I couldn't tell whether it was inside my head or out. Then I realized it was a siren. Fuzz, I thought dully. The cops have come for us. I tried to swallow a groan and wished wildly for soda. Someone with a cold, wet rag was gently sponging off my face, and a voice said, "I think he's coming around." I opened my eyes. It was dark. "I'm moving," I thought. "Are they taking me to jail?" "Where?" I said hoarsely, not able to get anything else out of my mouth. My throat was sore. I blinked at the stranger sitting beside me, but he wasn't a stranger. I'd seen him before. "Take it easy, kid. You're in an ambulance." "Where's Johnny?" I cried, frightened at being in this car with strangers. "And Dallas?" "They're in the other ambulance right behind us. Just calm down. You're going to be okay. You just passed out." "I didn't either," I said in the bored, tough voice we reserved for strangers and cops. "Dallas hit me." "How come?" "Because your back was in flames. That's why." I was surprised. "It was? Golly, I didn't feel it. It don't hurt." "We put it out before you got burned. That jacket saved you from a bad burning. Maybe saved your life. You just keeled over from smoke inhalation and a little shock. Of course, that slap on the back didn't help much." I remembered who he was then. Jerry somebody or other who was too heavy to get in the window. He must be a school teacher, I thought. "Are you taking us to the police station?" I was still a little mixed up as to what was coming off. The police station? It was his turn to be surprised. "What would we want to take you to the police station for? We're taking all three of you to the hospital." I let his first remark slide by. "Are Johnny and Dally all right?" "Which one's which?" "Johnny has black hair. Dally's the mean-looking one." He studied his wedding ring. Maybe he's thinking about his wife, I thought. I wish he'd say something. "We think the tow-headed kid is going to be all right. He burned one arm pretty badly, though, trying to drag the other kid out of the window. Johnny, well, I don't know about him. A piece of timber caught him across the back. He might have a broken back, and he was burned pretty severely. He passed out before he got out the window. They're giving him plasma now." He must have seen the look on my face because he hurriedly changed the subject. "I swear, you three are the bravest kids I've ever seen in a long time. First you and the black-haired kid climbing in that window, and then the tough-looking kid going back in to save him. Mrs. O'Brien and I think you were sent straight from heaven. Or are you just professional heroes or something?" Sent from heaven? Had he gotten a good look at Dallas? "No, we're greasers," I said. I was too worried and scared to appreciate the fact that he was trying to be funny. "You're what?" Greasers, you know? Like hoods? JDs? Johnny is wanted for murder, and Dallas has a record with the fuzz a mile long. Are you kidding me? Jerry stared at me as if he thought I was still in shock or something. I am not. Take me to town and you'll find out pretty quick. We're taking you to the hospital there anyway. The address card in your billfold said that was where you lived. Your name's really Pony Boy? Yeah, even on my birth certificate. And don't bug me about it. I felt weak. Are the little kids okay? Just fine. A little frightened, maybe. There were some short explosions right after you all got out. Sounded just exactly like gunfire. Gunfire? There went our gun, and gone with the wind. Were we sent from heaven? I started to laugh weakly. I guess that guy knew how close to hysterics I really was, for he talked to me in a low, soothing voice all the way to the hospital. I was sitting in the waiting room, waiting to hear how Dally and Johnny were. I had been checked over, and except for a few burns and a big bruise across my back, I was all right. I had watched them bring Dally and Johnny in on stretchers. Dally's eyes were closed, but when I spoke, he had tried to grin and had told me that if I ever did a stupid thing like that, he'd beat the tar out of me. He was still swearing at me when they took him on in. Johnny was still unconscious. I'd been afraid to look at him, but I was relieved to see that his face wasn't burned. He just looked very pale and still and sort of sick. I would have cried at the sight of him, so still I couldn't in front of people. Jerry Wood has stayed with me all the time. He kept thanking me for getting the kids out. He didn't seem to mind our being hoods. I told him the whole story, starting when Dallas and Johnny and I had met at the corner of Pickett and Sutton. I left out the part about the gun and our hitching a ride in the freight car. He was real nice about it and said that being trouble, especially since it was self-defense and all. I was sitting there smoking a cigarette when Jerry came back in from making a phone call. He stared at me for a second. You shouldn't be smoking. I was startled. How come? I looked at my cigarette. It looked okay to me. I looked around for a no smoking sign and couldn't find one. How come? Why, Jerry stammered. You're too young. I am? I had never thought about it. Everyone in our neighborhood, even the girls, smoked, except for Derry, who was too proud of his athletic health to risk a cigarette. We had all started smoking at an early age. Johnny had been smoking since he was 9. Steve started at 11, so no one thought it unusual when I started. I was the weed fiend in my family. Soda smokes only to steady his nerves or when he wants to look tough. Jerry simply sighed, then grinned. There are some people here to see you, claiming to be your brothers or something. I leaped up and ran for the door, but it was already open, and Soda had me in a bear hug and was swinging me around. I was so glad to see him I could have bawled. Finally he set me down and looked at me. He pushed my hair back. Oh, Pony Boy, your hair, your tough hair. Then I saw Derry. He was leaning in the doorway wearing his olive jeans and black t-shirt. He was still tall, broad-shouldered, Derry, but his fists were jammed in his pockets and his eyes were pleading. I simply looked at him. He swallowed and said in a husky voice, Pony Boy. I let go of Soda and stood there for a minute. Derry didn't like me. He had driven me away that night. He had hit me. Derry hollered at me. He didn't give a hang about me. Suddenly I realized, horrified, that Derry was crying. He didn't make a sound, but tears were running down his cheeks. I hadn't seen him cry in years, not even when Mom and Dad had been killed. I remembered the funeral. I had sobbed in spite of myself, so that I had broken down and bawled like a baby. But Derry had only stood there, his fists in his pockets and that look on his face, the same helpless, pleading look that he was wearing now. In that second, what Soda and Dally and Two-Bit had been trying to tell me came through. Daddy did care about me, maybe as much as he cared about Soda. And because he cared, he was trying too hard to make something of me. When he yelled Pony, where have you been all this time? He meant, Pony, you've scared me to death. Please be careful, because I couldn't stand it if anything happened to you. Daddy looked down and turned away silently. Suddenly, I broke out of my daze. Daddy, I screamed, and the next thing I knew, I had him around the waist and was squeezing the daylights out of him. Daddy, I said, I'm sorry. He was stroking my hair, and I could hear the sobs racking him as he fought to keep back the tears. Oh, Pony, I thought we'd lost you. Like we did Mom and Dad. That was his silent fear, then, of losing another person he loved. I remembered how close he and Dad had been, and I wondered how I could ever have thought him hard and unfeeling. I listened to his heart pounding through his t-shirt and knew everything was going to be okay now. I had taken the long way around, but I was finally home to stay. Alright guys, that is chapter 6. Now if you guys want me to read chapters 8 and 9 after I read chapter 7, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Subscribe to my YouTube, join the crew, you already know what to do. And now we're gonna go on to chapter 7. I'll give everyone a second to, turn to chapter 7. Do 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 do. Alright. Chapter 7. Now there were 3 of us sitting in the waiting room waiting to hear how Dally and Johnny were. Then the reporters and the police came. They asked too many questions too fast and got me mixed up. If you want to know the truth, I wasn't feeling real good in the first place. Kinda sick, really. And I'm scared of policemen anyway. The reporters fired one question right after another at me and got me so confused I didn't know what was coming off. Derry finally told them I wasn't in any shape to be yelled at so much, and they slowed down a little. Derry's kind of big. Soda Pop kept them in stitches. He'd grab one guy's press hat and another's camera and walk around interviewing the nurses and mimicking TV reporters. He tried to lift the policeman's gun and grinned so crazily when he was caught that the policeman had to grin too. Soda can make anyone grin. I managed to get hold of some hair grease and comb my hair back so that it looked a little better before they got any pictures. I'd die if I got my picture in the paper with my hair looking so lousy. Derry and Soda Pop were in the pictures too. Jerry Wood told me that if Soda Pop and Derry hadn't been so good looking, they wouldn't have taken so many. That was public appeal, he said. Soda was really getting a kick out of all of this. I guess he would have really enjoyed it more if it hadn't been so serious, but he couldn't resist anything that caused that much excitement. I swear, sometimes he reminds me of a colt, a long-legged Palomino colt that has to get his nose into everything. The reporters stared at him admiringly. I told you he looks like a movie star, and he kind of radiates. Finally, even Soda Pop got tired of the reporters. He gets bored with the same old thing after a time, and stretching out on the long bench. He put his head in Derry's lap and went to sleep. I guess both of them were tired. It was late at night, and I knew that they hadn't had much sleep during the week. Even while I was answering questions, I remembered that it had only been a few hours since I was sleeping off a smoke in the corner of the church. Already it was an unreal dream, and yet, at the time, I couldn't have imagined any of the world. Finally, the reporters started to leave, along with police. One of them turned and asked, "What would you do right now if you could do anything you wanted?" I looked at him tiredly. "Take a bath." They thought that was pretty funny, but I meant it. I felt lousy. The hospital got real quiet after they left. The only noise was the nurse's footsteps, and Soda's light breathing. Derry looked down at him and grinned half-heartedly. "He didn't get much sleep this week," he said softly. "He hardly slept at all." Soda said drowsily. "You didn't either." The nurses wouldn't tell us anything about Johnny and Dally, so Derry got hold of the doctor. The doctor told us that he would talk only to the family, but Derry finally got it through the guy's head that we were about as much family as Dally and Johnny had. Dally would be okay after 2 or 3 days in the hospital, he said. One arm was badly burned and would be scarred for the rest of his life, but he would have full use of it in a couple of weeks. Dally'll be okay, I thought. Dallas is always okay. He could take anything. It was Johnny I was worried about. He was in critical condition. His back had been broken when that piece of timber fell on him. He was in severe shock and suffering from third-degree burns. They were doing everything they could to ease the pain, although since his back was broken, he couldn't even feel the burns below his waist. He kept calling for Dallas and Ponyboy. If he lived, please no, I thought. Please not if. The blood was draining from my face, and Derry put an arm across my shoulder and squeezed hard. Even if he lived, he'd be crippled for the rest of his life. You wanted it straight, and you got it straight, the doctor said. Now go home and get some rest. Damn, the motion just shifted here. I mean, the mood just shifted. Oh boy. I was trembling. A pain was growing in my throat, and I wanted to cry. But greasers don't cry in front of strangers. Some of us never cry at all, like Dally and Two-Bit and Tim Shepard. They forgot how at an early age. Johnny crippled for life? I'm dreaming. I thought in panic. I'm dreaming. I'll wake up at home or in the church and everything will be okay. Be like it used to be. But I didn't believe myself. Even if Johnny did live, he'd be crippled and never play football or help us out in a rumble again. He'd have to stay in the house that he hated, where he wasn't wanted, and things could never be like they used to be. I didn't trust myself to speak. If I said one word, the hard knot in my throat would swell, and I'd be crying in spite of myself. I took a deep breath and kept my mouth shut. Soda was awake by then, and although he looked stony-faced, as if he hadn't heard a word the doctor had said, his eyes were bleak and stunned. Serious reality has a hard time coming through to Soda, but when it does, it hits him hard. He looked like I felt when I had seen the black-haired Soch lying doubled up and still in the moonlight. Derry was rubbing the back of my head softly. We better go home. We can't do anything here. In our Ford, I was suddenly overcome by sleepiness. I leaned back and closed my eyes, and we were home before I knew it. Soda was shaking me gently. "Hey, Ponyboy, wake up. You still gotta get to the house." I said sleepily, and I laid down in the seat. I couldn't have gotten up to save my life. I could hear Soda and Derry, but as if from a great distance. "Oh, come on, Ponyboy," Soda pleaded, shaking me a little harder. "We're sleepy too." I guess Derry was tired of fooling around because he picked me up and carried me in. "He's getting mighty big to be carried," Soda said. I wanted to tell him to shut up and let me sleep, but I yawned. "He sure lost a lot of weight," Derry said. I thought sleepily that I should at least pull off my shoes, but I didn't. I went to sleep the minute Derry tossed me on the bed. I'd forgotten how soft the bed really was. I was the first one up the next morning. Soda must have pulled my shoes and shirt off for me. I was still wearing my jeans. He must have been too sleepy to undress himself, though. He lay stretched out beside me, fully clothed. I wiggled out from under his arm and pulled the blanket up over him, then went to take a shower. Asleep, he looked a lot younger than going on 17, but I had noticed that Johnny looked younger when he was asleep too, so I figured everyone did. Maybe people are younger when they are asleep. After my shower, I put on some clean clothes and spent 5 minutes or so hunting for a hint of beard on my face and mourning over my shower. That bum haircut made my ears stick out. Daddy was still asleep when I went into the kitchen to fix breakfast. The first one up has to fix breakfast, and the other two do the dishes. That's the rule around our house. And it's usually Daddy who fixes breakfast, and me and Soda who are left with the dishes. I hunted through the icebox and found some eggs. We all like our eggs done differently. I like them hard. Daddy likes them in a bacon and tomato sandwich, and Soda Pop eats his with grape jelly. All three of us like chocolate cake for breakfast. Mom and Dad never allowed it with ham and eggs, but Daddy let Soda and me talk him into it. We really didn't have to twist his arm. Daddy loves chocolate cake as much as we do. Soda Pop always makes sure there's some in the icebox every night, and if there isn't, he cooks one up real quick. I like Daddy's cake better. Soda Pop always puts too much sugar in the icing. I don't see how he stands jelly and eggs and chocolate cake all at once, but he seems to like it. Daddy drinks black coffee, and Soda Pop and I drink chocolate milk. We could have coffee if we wanted it, but we like chocolate milk. All three of us are crazy about chocolate stuff. Soda says if they ever make a chocolate cigarette, I'll have it made. Anybody home? A familiar voice called through the front screen, and 2-Bit and Steve came in. We always just stick our heads into each other's houses and holler hey and walk in. Our front door is always unlocked in case one of the boys is hacked off at his parents and needs a place to lay over and cool off. We never could tell who we'd find stretched out on the sofa in the morning. It was usually Steve, whose father told him about once a week to get out and never come back. It kind of bugs Steve, even if his old man does give him $5 or $6 the next day to make up for it. Or it might be Dally, who lived anywhere he could. Once we even found Tim Shepard, leader of the Shepherd gang and far from his own turf, reading the morning paper in the armchair. He merely looked up and said, "Hi," and strolled out without staying for breakfast. 2-Bit's mother warned us about burglars, but Darry flexing his muscles so that they bulged like oversized baseballs, drawled that he wasn't afraid of any burglars, and that we didn't really have anything worth. He'd risk a robbery, he said, if it meant keeping one of the boys from blowing up and robbing a gas station or something. So the door was never locked. "In here," I yelled, forgetting that Darry and Soda Pop were still asleep. "Don't slam the door." They slammed the door, of course, and 2-Bit came running into the kitchen. He caught me by the upper arms and swung me around, ignoring the fact that I had 2 uncooked eggs in my hand. "Hey, Pony Boy," he cried gleefully. "Long time no see." You would have thought it had been 5 years instead of 5 days since I seen him last, but I didn't mind. I like old 2-Bit. He's a good buddy to have. He spun me into Steve, who gave me a playful slap on my bruised back and shoved me across the room. One of the eggs went flying. It landed on the clock, and I tightened my grip on the other one so that it crushed and ran all over my hand. "Now look what you did," I griped. "There went our breakfast. Can't you two wait till I set the eggs down before you go shoving me all over the country?" I really was a little mad because I had just realized how long it had been since I'd eaten anything. The last thing I'd eaten was a hot fudge sundae at Dairy Queen in Windricksville, and I was hungry. 2-Bit was walking in a slow circle around me, and I sighed because I knew what was coming. Man, Dick Baldy here. He was staring at my head as he circled me. I wouldn't have believed it. I thought all the wild Indians in Oklahoma had been tamed. What little squaw's got that tough-looking mop of yours, pony boy? Aw, lay off, I said. I wasn't feeling too good in the first place. Kind of like I was coming down with something. Two-Bit winked at Steve, and Steve said why he had to get a haircut to get his picture in the paper. They'd never believe a greasy-looking mug could be a hero. How do you like being a hero, Big Shot? How do I like what? Being a hero, you know. He shoved the morning paper at me impatiently, like a big shot even. I stared at the newspaper. On the front page of the second section was the headline, "Juvenile Delinquents Turn Heroes." What I like is the turn bit. Two-Bit said, cleaning the eggs up off the floor. Y'all were heroes from the beginning. You just didn't turn all of a sudden. I hardly heard him. I was reading the paper. The whole page was covered with stories about us. The fight, the murder, the church burning, the socials being drunk, everything. My picture was there with Derry and Soda Pop. The article told how Johnny and I risked our lives saving those little kids, and there was a comment from one of the parents who said that they would all have burned to death if it hadn't been for us. It told the whole story of our fight with the socials. Only they didn't say socials because most grown-ups don't know about the battles that go on between us. They had interviewed Cherry Valance, and she said Bob had been drunk and that the boys had been looking for a fight when they took her home. Bob had told her he'd fix us for picking up his girl. His buddy Randy Adderson, who had helped jump us, also said it was their fault and that we'd only fought back in self-defense. But they were charging Johnny with manslaughter. Then I discovered that I was supposed to appear at juvenile court for running away, and Johnny was too if he recovered. Not if, I thought again. Why do they keep saying if? For once, there weren't any charges against Dally, and I knew he'd be mad because the paper made him out a hero for saving Johnny. It didn't say much about his police record, which he was kind of proud of. He'd kill those reporters if he got hold of them. There was another column about just Derry and Soda and me. How Derry worked on 2 jobs at once and made good at both of them. And about his outstanding record at school. It mentioned Soda Pop dropping out of school so we could stay together. And that made the honor roll at school all the time and might be a future track star. Oh yeah, I forgot I'm on the A squad track team, the youngest one. I'm a good runner. Then it said we shouldn't be separated after we had worked so hard to stay together. The meaning of that last line finally hit me. You mean, I swallowed hard, that they're thinking about putting me and Soda in a boys' home or something? Steve was carefully combing back his hair in complicated swirls, something like that. We couldn't get hauled off now. Not after me and Derry had finally, and now that the big rumble was coming up and we would settle this Soch greaser thing once and for all. Not now, when Johnny needed us and Dally was still in the hospital and this rumble. No, I said out loud, and Two-Bit, who was scraping the eggs off the clock, turned to stare at me. No what? No, they ain't going to put us in a boys' home. Don't worry about it, Steve said, cocksure that he and Soda Pop could handle anything that came up. They don't do things like that to heroes. We're Soda. Where are and Superman? That was as far as he got because Derry were muscles at one or another. But one time Steve made the mistake of referring him to as all brawn and no brain, and Derry almost shattered Steve's jaw. Steve didn't call him that again, but Derry never forgave him. Derry has never really gotten over not going to college. That was the only time I've ever seen Soda mad at Steve. Although Soda attaches no importance to education, school bored him. No action. Soda came running in. "Where's that blue shirt I washed yesterday?" He took a swig of chocolate milk out of the container. "Hate to tell you, buddy," Steve said. "Still flat on the floor. But you have to wear clothes to work. There's a law or something." "Oh yeah," Soda said. "Where are those wheat jeans, too?" "I ironed. They're in my closet." Derry said. "Hurry up. You're gonna be late." Soda ran back muttering, I'm hurrying." Steve followed him, and in a second there was the general racket of a pillow fight. I absent-mindedly watched Derry as he searched for the icebox for chocolate cake. "Derry," I said suddenly, did you know about the juvenile court?" Without turning to look at me, he said evenly, "Yeah, the cops told me last night." I knew then that he realized we might get separated. I didn't want him to worry anymore, but I said, "I had one of those dreams last night. The one I can't even remember." Derry spun around to face me, genuine fear on his face. "What?" I had a nightmare the night of Mom and Dad's funeral. I'd had nightmares and wild dreams every once in a while when I was little, but nothing like this one. I woke up screaming bloody murder, and I never could remember what it was that scared me. It scared Soda Pop and Derry almost as bad as it scared me. For night after night, for weeks on end, I would dream this dream and wake up in a cold sweat or screaming. And I never could remember exactly what happened in it. Soda began sleeping with me, and it stopped recurring so often, but it happened often enough for Derry to take me to a doctor. The doctor said I had too much imagination. He had a simple cure, too. Study harder, read more, draw more, and play football more. After a hard game of football and 4 or 5 hours of reading, I was too exhausted, mentally and physically, to dream anything. But Derry never got over it, and every once in a while he would ask me if I ever dreamed anymore. Was it very bad? Two-Bit questioned. He knew the whole story, and having never dreamed about anything but blondes, he was interested. "No," I lied. I had awakened in a cold sweat and shivering, but Soda was dead to the world. I had just wiggled closer to him and stayed awake for a couple of hours, trembling under his arm. That dream always scared the heck out of me. Derry started to say something, but before he could begin, Soda Pop and Steve came in. "You know what?" Soda Pop said to no one in particular. "When we stomp the Soshis good, me and Stevie here are going to throw a big party and everyone can get stoned. Then we'll go chase the Soshis clear to Mexico." "Where are you going to get the dough, little man?" Derry had found the cake and was handing out pieces. "I'll think of something," Soda Pop assured him between bites. "You going to take Sandy to the party?" I asked, just to be saying something. Instant silence. I looked around. "What's the deal?" Soda Pop was staring at his feet, but his ears were rending. "No. She went to live with her grandmother in Florida." "How come?" "Look," Steve said, surprisingly angry. "Does he have to draw you a picture? It was either that or got married, and her parents almost hit the roof at the idea of her marrying a 16-year-old kid. 17, Soda said softly. "I'll be 17 in a couple of weeks." "Oh," I said, embarrassed. Soda was no innocent. I had been in on bull sessions, and his bragging was as loud as anyone's. But never about Sandy. Not ever about Sandy. Remembered how her blue eyes had glowed when she looked at him, and I was sorry for her. Hold on, guys. I remembered how her blue eyes had glowed when she looked at him, and I was sorry for her. There was a heavy silence. Then Derry said, "We'd better get on to work, Pepsi Cola." Derry rarely called Soda by Dad's pet nickname for him. But he did so then because he knew how miserably Soda Pop was about Sandy. "I hate to leave you here by yourself, Pony Boy," Darius said slowly. "Maybe I ought to take the day off. I've stayed by my lonesome before. You can't afford a day off." Yeah, but you just got back, and I really ought to stay. "I'll babysit him," Two-Bit said, ducking as I took a swing at him. "I haven't got anything better to do." "Why don't you get a job?" Steve said. "Even consider working for a living." "Work?" Two-Bit was aghast. "And ruin my rep? I wouldn't be babysitting the kid here if I knew of some good day nursery open on Saturdays." I pulled his chair over backward and jumped on him, but he had me down in a second. I was kind of short on wind. "I've got to cut out smoking or I won't make track next year." "Holler uncle." "Nope," I said, struggling, but I didn't have my usual strength. Darry was pulling on his jacket. "You two do up the dishes. You can go to the movies if you want before you go see Dally and Johnny." He paused for a second, watching Two-Bit squash the hell out of me. "Two-Bit, lay off. He ain't looking so good, Pony Boy. He ain't looking so good. Pony Boy, you take a couple of aspirin and go easy. You smoke more than a pack today, and I'll skin you. Understood?" "Yeah," I said, getting to my feet. "You carry more than one bundle of roofing at a time a day, and meal soda'll skin you. Understood?" He grinned one of his rare grins. "Yeah. See you all this afternoon." "Bye," I said. I heard our Ford's vroom and thought, "Soda's driving," and they left. Anyway, I was walking around downtown and started to take the shortcut through an alley. Two-Bit was telling me about one of his many exploits while we did the dishes. While I did the dishes, he was sitting on the cabinet, sharpening that black-handled switchblade he was so proud of. And I ran into three guys. I says howdy, and they just look at each other. Then one says we would jump you, but since you're as slick as we figured, you don't have nothing worth taking. I says, "Buddy, that's the truth," and went right on. Moral: what's the safest thing to be when one is met by a gang of social outcasts in an alley? "A judo expert?" I suggested. "No, another social outcast," Two-Bit yelped, and nearly fell off the cabinet from laughing so hard. I had to grin too. He saw things straight and made them into something funny. "We're gonna clean up the house," I said. "The reporters or police or somebody might come by, and anyway, it's time for those guys from the state to come by and check up on us. This house ain't messy. You ought to see my house. I have. And if you had the sense of a billy goat, you'd try to help around your place instead of bumming around. Shoot, kid, if I ever did that, my mom would die of shock." I liked Two-Bit's mother. She had the same good humor and easy-going ways that he did. She wasn't lazy like him, but she let him get away with murder. I don't know though. It's just about impossible to get him mad. To get mad at him, my bad. When we had finished, I pulled on Dally's brown leather jacket. The back was burned black, and we started for 10th Street. "I would drive us," Two-Bit said as we walked up the street, trying to thumb a ride. "But the brakes are out on my car. Almost killed me and Kathy the other night." He flipped the collar of his black leather jacket up to serve as a windbreak while he lit a cigarette. "You ought to see Kathy's brother. Now there's a hood. He's so greasy he glides when he walks. He goes to the barber for an oil change, not a haircut." I would have laughed, but I had a terrific headache. We stopped at the Tasty Freeze to buy Cokes and rest up, and the blue Mustang that had been trailing us for 8 blocks pulled in. I almost decided to run, and Two-Bit must have guessed this, for he shook his head over so slightly and tossed me a cigarette. As I lit up, the Socs had jumped Johnny and me at the park, hopped out of the Mustang. I recognized Randy Anderson, Marcia's boyfriend, and the tall guy that had almost drowned me. I hated them. It was their fault Bob was dead. Their fault Johnny was dying. Their fault Soda and I might get put in a boys' home. I hated them as bitterly and as contemptuously as Dallas Winston hated. Two-Bit put an elbow on my shoulder and leaned against me, dragging on his cigarette. "You know the rules. No jazz before the rumble," he said to the Socs. "We know," Randy said. He looked at me. "Come here. I want to talk to you." I glanced at Two-Bit. He shrugged. I followed Randy over to his car, out of earshot of the rest. We sat there in his car for a second, silent. "Golly, that was the toughest car I've ever been in." "I read about you in the paper," Randy said finally. "How come?" "I don't know. Maybe I felt like playing hero." I wouldn't have. I would have let those kids burn to death." "You might not have. You might have done the same thing." Randy put out a cigarette and pressed in the car lighter. "I don't know. I don't know anything anymore. I would have never believed a greaser could pull something like that. Greaser didn't have anything to do with it. My buddy over there wouldn't have done it. Maybe you would have done the same thing. Maybe a friend of yours wouldn't have. It's the individual." "I'm not going to show at the Rumble tonight," Randy said slowly. I took a good look at him. He was 17 or so, but he was already old. Like Dallas was old. Cherry had said her friends were too cool to feel anything, and yet she could remember watching sunsets. Randy was supposed to be too cool to feel anything, and yet there was pain in his eyes. I'm sick of all of this. Sick and tired. Bob was a good guy. He was the best buddy a guy could ever have. I mean, he was a fighter, and tough and everything, but he was a real person too. You dig? I nodded. "He's dead. His mother has had a nervous breakdown. They've spoiled him rotten. I mean, most parents would be proud of a kid like that, good looking and smart and everything, but they gave in to him all the time. He kept trying to make someone say no, and they never did. They never did. That was what he wanted, for someone to tell him no. To have somebody lay down the law, set the limits, give him something solid to stand on. That's what we all want, really. One time." Randy tried to grin, but I could tell he was close to tears. "One time he came home drunker than anything. He thought sure they were gonna raise the roof. You know what they did? They thought it was something that they'd done. They thought it was their fault, that they failed him and driven him to it or something. They took all the blame and didn't do anything to him. If his old man had just belted him, just once, he might still be alive. I don't know why I'm telling you this. I couldn't tell anyone else. My friends, they'd think I was off my rocker or turning soft. Maybe I am. I just know that I'm sick of all this mess. That kid, your buddy, the one that got burned, he might die?" "Yeah," I said, trying not to think about Johnny. "And tonight, people get hurt in rumbles, maybe killed. I'm sick of it because it doesn't do any good. You can't win. You know that, don't you?" And when I remained silent, he went on, "You can't win, even if you whip us. You'll still be where you were before, at the bottom. And we'll still be the lucky ones with all the breaks. So it doesn't do any good, the fighting and the killing. It doesn't prove a thing. We'll forget it if you win, or if you don't. Greasers will still be greasers, and the Socs will still be Socs. Sometimes I think it's the ones in the middle that are really lucky stiffs." He took a deep breath. "So I'd fight if I thought it'd do any good. I think I'm going to leave town. Take my old little Mustang, and all the dough I can carry and get out. Running away won't help. Oh hell, I know it, Randy half sobbed. But what can I do? I'm marked chicken if I punk out at the Rumble, and I hate myself if I didn't. I don't know what I'd do. I'd help you if I could, I said. I remembered Cherry's voice. Things are rough all over. I knew then what she meant. He looked at me. No, you wouldn't. I'm a soc. You get a little money and the whole world hates you. No, I said. You hate the whole world. He just looked at me. From the way he looked, he could have been 10 years older than he was. I got out of the car. You would have saved those kids if you had been there, I said. You'd have saved them the same as we did. Thanks, Grease, he said, trying to grin. Then he stopped. I didn't mean that. I meant, thanks, kid. My name's Ponyboy, I said. Nice talking to you, Randy. I walked over to 2-Bit, and Randy honked for his friends to come in and get into his car. What'd he want? 2-Bit asked. What did Mr. Super Soc have to say? He ain't a Soc, I said. He's just a guy. He just wanted to talk. You want to see a movie before we go see Johnny and Dallas? Nope, I said, lighting up another weed. I still had a headache, but I feel better. Socs were just guys after all. Things were rough all over, but it was better that way. That way you could tell the other guy was human too. Alright guys, that concludes chapter 7. If you want to subscribe, the like goal is 6 likes. As soon as we get 6 likes, I will most definitely upload the next video of chapters 8 and 9 of the Outsiders. Well, anyway guys, I'm going to say this again, even though I just said it, and you always know when we have the NBA screen up, we always have to end the stream with a nice 3-pointer. Alright, this is for you, Miss J. There we go. I'm going to shoot one for Jason as well. Well, Jason, sorry about that. Well, anyway, guys, I'm going to say this again. If you like this video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Out.